do with them? Well, when you take that bag out of the sous vide bath, you snip it open, pull the meat out, there will be liquid left over. You can take and reduce that down, make a pan sauce or whatever you want with it. And so if you want to mix your veggies in that, that would certainly work. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Feel free to come grab me afterward. Blue shirt.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about your decision to focus on a meat-based diet in the context of a hacker conference that's really concerned with social change.
Sure.
Given the really negative ramifications of carnivore diets, both socially and environmentally.
So you're kind of asking about, say what? I look at it kind of from the science point of view, and to be clear, I'm only talking about like 10 pages out of 400 so far. So the book itself really has a lot of different stuff, including kind of discussion of, hey, environmental impact of, say, beef versus chicken versus fish versus veggies. I understand where you're coming from, and I kind of share a lot of the same concerns, absolutely.
It feels that even really within the context of the conversation we're having with you, that's where a lot of the questions are coming out. And a lot of things.
Sure. Well, I'll get on to some more other topics that are less meat-based and a little more fun from that point of view. But thanks for the question. Black shirt? Cooking at sufficiently low, you're asking if the bacteria and what the bacterial concerns are. See that 131? We'll get there. Actually, how much time, where are we at? Yeah, we're halfway through. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next section and hold your questions. So 5 key temperatures in cooking. When I first started the project, I don't think I would have thought that this would have been one of the things that would have come out of it. But to me, I look at these 5 temperatures and I go, wow, these are really important temperatures. How come I never hear them talked about this way? So 122, sorry to go back to the meat bit for a little while, but bear with me, is when myosin begins to denature in meat. This is mammalian meat. For fish, it's around 104 to 106 degrees. 131. This is when the highest reported survival temperature of bacteria in the literature. So this is for a particular pathogen called B. cereus. I don't know who names these things, but that's the name of it. So the thing to remember about bacteria is it's not like they instantly die at 132. The food industry kind of has this danger zone rule that says you're not supposed to hold food between 40 Fahrenheit and 140 Fahrenheit for more than 2 or 4 hours, depends upon what state you're in. But the assumption there is that bacteria basically can multiply within that range, and outside that range, you're basically safe. But the reality of it is it's not like the bacteria are reproducing like full on at exactly 40 degrees, and at 39 they're doing absolutely nothing. It's much more kind of this curve, and it depends upon the particular bacteria how quickly they multiply. What food scientists and food safety experts are worried about is the quantity of bacteria and pathogens in a particular dish, whatever it is. And it also depends upon the strain of bacteria or parasite. But with bacteria, sometimes as few as like 5 is enough to actually cause an infection in you. In other cases, it takes like 100,000. So really, it's not just like are they present or are they not. It's not a binary. It's a question of how much exposure is there and what the probability is. So from a food safety point of view, the numbers that they give publicly are really all about this probabilities game of trying to make sure that from a probability point of view, you're safe. Because really at the end of the day, it sucks to have foodborne illness. And just to give you some numbers on foodborne illness, CDC estimates about 75 million Americans a year come down with something from foodborne illness. So most likely, you personally will have 2 or so foodborne illness incidences in any given decade. It's fine if you're a healthy young adult male like me, but if you're pregnant or really young or really old or immunocompromised, it can lead to much more serious complications. So when it comes to the bacteria and actually holding stuff at temperature, this is a curve for time at temperature. This is from the FSIS, which is a group under the USDA, for how long you need to hold. In this case, this particular one's for lean chicken breast, poultry. You have to hold that chicken breast at 136 degrees Fahrenheit for over an hour, almost an hour and a half, to actually sufficiently kill any salmonella that might be present. And the reason for that is that they don't die instantly. And kind of the analogy I like to give is imagine being in a desert. It's 120 degrees. Actually imagine like 100 of you are in a desert. It's not like at 3 hours and 59 minutes, everyone's gonna be alive, and at 4 hours, you're all gonna suddenly die. It's gonna be kind of some fall off. And so they're looking at sufficient log reduction of bacteria present in the particular meat. And it just depends upon what the temperature and how long you hold it. So the last meat-based temperature here is 150. This is when actin begins to denature, as I mentioned earlier. It's kind of a nice little quick chart of, hey, there's this really narrow good range where stuff's really, really good. And below that, you've got food safety or undercooked issues. And above that, texturally, it's overcooked. Last two, Maillard reaction. This is a really well-known one. This is a Brownian reaction in proteins with simple sugars. So things like bread, when you actually look at bread in an oven, it starts to turn brown. The surface of that bread is like 310 degrees. And this is like one of the best moments for me in writing the book was I have an IR thermometer. It's basically looks at surface temperature of things. It's like best geek toy ever. Like, go get one. And I pointed at a loaf of bread I was baking. Like, it registered 310 degrees. And I was like, yes, science lines up with reality again. So, I mean, this is the same thing on meat. Different types of cooking methods will get you into that temperature range. So if you think about Brussels sprouts, boiling them, like they can't get up to 310 degrees, like they're in water. So they'll never get that Brownian reaction. They'll always have this mild flavor. Whereas if you cook them with a method that can get that hot, then you're able to actually get those reactions and get the associated flavors. And the last one, 356, caramelization. It's basically sugars breaking down, and when they break down, they then like form hundreds of new compounds, and basically we like those flavors for some bizarre reason. One of the cool things is that you can actually see this reaction occur. So I baked a batch of sugar cookies at 4 different temperatures, and at 350 and below, they're kind of lighter blonde colored, and at 375, 400, they get this darker color. It's not like a particular point where that caramelization really, suddenly turns brown, but it's kind of this ramp from 356 up to 380 where sugar like gets darker and darker and darker and more complex and more bitter flavored. But sugar itself actually melts exactly at 367, which is this really cool trick because you can actually calibrate your oven using it. So if you throw a little sugar in a glass bowl and put in your oven at 350, like it might begin to caramelize and turn like slightly brown, but it should still be a powder. And at 375, it should melt and like just look like glass and like be able to see through it. So cool little trick. You can also just throw sugar into a pan and melt it. There's nothing else in there but sugar. And when it comes to like making caramel sauce, like the standard way is take sugar, add some water, add some other stuff, carefully boil all this other stuff. You can just throw sugar into a pan and melt it. Add a little cream. You won't be able to get like a light caramel sauce, but you'll be able to get a caramel sauce that's kind of a medium brown. And it's actually really fast and easy to do. So quick summary of temperatures. Peek at my next slide. Yeah, okay, we'll get there. I'll stop again here for a minute and take any questions.
So if caramelization is happening in freeze, whatever, why can you make toffee out of condensed milk just by boiling it, which can't be above 210 or so?
Toffee. Making toffee from condensed milk. Well, I'll need to check this, but sugar by itself will melt at 367. But when you dissolve it into something, it's no longer a simple structure. That you're looking at something that's a little bit more different. The other thing is milk's mostly lactose, and I think lactose actually begins to caramelize around 230. Like fructose and lactose and a few other sugars, they're not all in this higher temperature range. No, that's sucrose. Yeah, common table sugar. Red shirt.
What about the temperatures at which important vegetable proteins particularly cellulose and
Temperatures of veggie proteins. Well, not proteins, but yeah. Things like cellulose, well, I'm going to give you a hand-wavy answer, 140 degrees. Veggies are a lot more complicated than meat, which is why, from a food science point of view, it's really easy to talk about meat, and it's really hard to talk about vegetables. So I actually interviewed Hervé Thies for the book, and I was talking with him about this, and his lab's currently studying vegetables, a lot of stuff in vegetables, because frankly, there's not a lot of research done in that. In part because, well, who benefits from the research and who funds it? It's just really hard to get funding for some kinds of research where it's not applicable in industry kind of to some degree. So yeah, there's a lot of things we don't know about food. That really surprised me, actually. It's how little we know about food science yet, how much, how important it is to us from a cultural point of view and from an industrial point of view and from a, Earth-life balance point of view. Yet at the same time, it's really complicated. So stuff like the chloroplasts, I think it is, in veggies, you'll start to see reactions around 140 degrees.
chlorophyll reaction?
chlorophyll, sorry. Stuff like cellulose and lignans like cellulose is basically fiber. I don't think it begins to break down until like 300 something degrees Celsius. I mean, like, it's not going to break down in your kitchen. Or I should say, by the time it breaks down, you don't want to eat it. I mean, there are industrial ways of like grinding it and getting cellulose powders, but like, you're not going to want them. Go ahead. Changes in taste over time. Is that kind of what you're asking? Super tasting does not change over time. You either are or not. That's the genetic thing. There is a like slow loss of sensitivity of taste, starting kind of in your late 40s, early 50s, and it's kind of gradual. Kids with bitterness, yeah. There's an aversion to bitterness from a physiological point of view, just because most poisonous things taste bitter. Like, it's kind of like a survival thing, I guess. But it ends up being that we can kind of learn to like bitter things. It's something that, you know, we with exposure learn to like. And there was one other, hot things. Hot things are really interesting, actually. There's this neurotransmitter called substance P. P stands for pain, go figure. Basically, it gets depleted. So if you eat spicy food, like this neurotransmitter that helps your body recognize, hey, there's something hot here, like it slowly depletes. And like it takes a couple of weeks, but after a couple of weeks, you can actually kind of deplete your levels down. And then it takes a couple more weeks for your body to replenish it if you stop eating spicy food. So this is where these really great stories of Indian students back in like the 80s coming to, you know, the United States, studying college, eating dorm food, going home, eating their mom's cooking, and going, this is too hot, I can't eat it. And their mom's going, what has America done to you? Nothing other than they didn't serve you enough hot foods. Your substance P levels didn't replenished. So yeah, you can actually build up a tolerance to like specifically capsaicin and hot things. So I mean, yeah, there's that as well, which is actually really cool. Go ahead. Back to meat. Dum 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 dum. Umami and savoriness. Yes. Well, it's basically glutamate. So it's one of the 5 primary tastes that we know we have receptors for in our tongue. It doesn't break down with heat. So there are certain ingredients that have a lot of glutamate in them naturally. Things that go on pizza just happen to have a lot of glutamate. Tomatoes, Parmesan cheese, mushrooms. There's a reason why I think pizzas are so well liked. But yeah, I mean, MSG has kind of gotten a bad rap in this country, but like if you want more glutamate, like a small amount of it, I mean, it's going to hit those receptors. But does that answer your question? Okay. White shirt.
Just to be clear on the facts, so like if I were to bake a chicken, I might put it in the oven, does it only get up to 150?
Hopefully it gets to 150. Yeah, no, I mean, if you put chicken into your oven at 350 and your chicken actually got to be 350 degrees, you'd have a piece of charcoal. There'd be no moisture left. It'd be completely dry, and like, it would be the most overcooked chicken in the world. There's actually this really fascinating patent case that happened about a decade ago. These 2 different patents were written about like baking. I think it was like baking bread, and like one patent, like literally the process was baking bread at 350 degrees. Another one was baking bread to 350 degrees. And they were like suing each other in court, and they were actually found to not be infringing each other because literally one said you bake the bread to 350 degrees, which means a piece of bread baked to 350 degrees where it's like got no moisture left. But yeah, no, when you're cooking chicken, you want the internal temperature. Oh geez, this is gonna be recorded, isn't it? Maybe I should be careful about what I say. You want your internal temperature of your chicken to be 165 degrees, in quote marks. The reason for that is they assume that, well, as one food scientist put it for me, the numbers are for dumbasses. I'm quoting somebody. And she justified it and said that with those temperatures, they assumed that your thermometer was like a dial thermometer that's miscalibrated by maybe 5 or 10 degrees. So now we're talking about 155 degrees. And they also assumed that you misprobed the coldest part of the meat. So you weren't actually getting the cold part, you know, maybe near the bone, but like just didn't quite hit the coldest part. So another 5 degrees. So it kind of gets you down to 150 degrees. The other thing is that that number is an instant kill temperature. So that what that means is if you see chicken at 165 degrees, any bacteria that's present will be dead on that log curve thing. Because like the die-off is so fast. But you can cook it, like if you actually, I mean, if you look at the industrial food processing guidelines, you can cook chicken at 140 degrees, as long as you hold it for sufficient time. And actually it's really good. Because I mean, saying medium rare chicken sounds really gross, but